Okay, today is the day. Today is the day after a 3-month winter. We finally have all the pieces that we need to get the Supra back on the ground. We have brake calipers, we have pistons and seals, we have brake lines, we have brake fluid, we have everything that we need to complete this project in one day. And it should be relatively simple. Taking the car apart, we understand when you're taking a 21-year-old car apart, you're going to run into some issues. But we've done all that. We've done all the work beforehand so that the backload side is easy. We just put it together, bleed the brakes, and get this thing back on the ground and started for the first time in months. The timing couldn't be better. The weather's starting to turn here in the Midwest, so I'm very eager to get into this. I don't want to waste any time. Let's get into it.
Alright, now the first thing we need to do to get these things back on the car is to install our new seals and clips. We're using the old pistons because those things are pretty much impossible to find, but we're freshening up all the rubber internals. So the first thing we need to do is to grab a caliper half and get started. I didn't lube the piston bore very good before I sent it to Kyle at Chemical Customs, so first I had to use a little emery cloth to wipe away any rust that's accumulated on the piston bore surface. Next, we need to install the internal O-ring that helps make sure fluid doesn't push beyond the piston. Now, this is probably the most important piece when rebuilding calipers, and thankfully it's probably also the easiest to install. After that, I poured a little .4 into each piston bore to help lube both the O-ring and the cylinder so that our piston pushes in nice and free. Next, we install the rubber seals that wrap around the pistons, working it around to make sure that nothing is folded over while we've pushed it in place. Then, same as the piston bore before, we lube the pistons themselves with plenty of .4, and I've learned that you can't use too little of this stuff. Really cake that stuff on so we don't get resistance when pushing it in place. Now it's time to get the piston down in the cylinder. First, we push it down to the O-ring that should be well lubed at this point. We spin it around and try to help it seat. Then with a little pressure, we should be able to push the piston right down into place. After we have the seal clips in place, it's time to bolt the caliper halves together. There is a rubber O-ring right in the middle where the fluid pushes from half to half that you definitely don't want to forget. I use a soft impact to run the bolts down before we start adding the hardware. Pad installation is pretty simple. The pads float in place and are held with 2 retention pins and a metal guide to keep the pads in line. After the pads are installed, I torque the caliper bolts down to roughly 15 Greg pounds before finishing the caliper off by installing the brake line fitting. Getting the calipers back on the car is just as simple as it was taking them off. Thread on your 2 mounting bolts, attach the brake line, and you're done. Once I had the bolts tight, I called in for some reinforcements to make sure.
Okay, so we've got the calipers put back together and ready to put back on the car. I put the right front one, which you've seen, on so far. I just wanted to take a second. I know I'm close because my arm's only so long, but this is the first time I've seen the caliper color we chose, the stickers, the rotors, everything put together for the first time. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but this thing looks absolutely insane. This thing looks so good. I mean, it looks factory. But let's smash the next 3 on and then get this thing on the ground and get this thing bled.
Bleeding brakes is pretty straightforward. As you pressurize the brake pedal, crack 1 bleeder screw at a time until you purge the line of air. You start with the longest line and work your way towards the front. It was all going super good and we were almost done, and then this happened.
Okay, so we've had problems, just problems you expect when working on a 21-year-old car throughout this process. As we're upgrading, we're having to cut away old parts. I mean, there's just a mix of issues you come across, as is the case anytime you modify a car this old. However, if you didn't notice just a second ago, we do have a problem with the right rear caliper. So basically, when we were bleeding the brakes, we start with the furthest line, which for us is the right rear, since the master cylinder's in the front left. We started by bleeding the brakes. We went all the way around the car, felt like I had good pedal. There was no air I could find, but because I wanted to check all the calipers again to make sure we didn't suck any air in any of the lines after we'd bled them, I started with the right rear, and as I was hooking the hose up, noticed there was some fluid sitting on top of the caliper, and after further inspection, there is a crack on the top of the caliper, most likely from a previous owner over tightening a bleed screw, and it just can't be. It's not something that can be repaired or driven. Most importantly, so really disappointed that we're not able to finish the car today. I have the rest of the calipers on and bled, and now we're going to have to try to source a new caliper. If you remember, I bought those on eBay. Or not eBay, Facebook, and it's unfortunate because I doubt he would have known. I didn't notice before. It's just unfortunate, and you know, it's what you expect when you're modifying an old car like this. But I was excited to get the car on the ground. Like I said, the weather's turned here in the Midwest, and it's unfortunate, but not something to hang our head on. It's a lot better to find out this way with the car on jack stands than it is having not caught it, get the thing on the road, we lose pressure all of a sudden. If you remember, we've talked a lot about pressure and brakes. It's like a balloon that holds air as long as there's not a hole in the balloon. So if we have a hole in the balloon, it's bound to pop, and for a car that generally means rear-ending something or just nothing good. Especially with these cars, with how expensive parts are getting and the Supra tax, it would have been unfortunate. So I'm glad we found it now. Just disappointed we can't get the car on the ground, but you know, it is what it is. So goes life. So goes modifying cars. I'm not sure if I'll end the video here. Or hopefully I can find the caliper before I've gotten done editing. And disappointed, but nothing to hang our head on. And we'll regroup, get this thing back on the ground, and ready for summer. So I appreciate you watching if you've made it this far in any of these videos. And hopefully we get another caliper that we can smash on right now. Okay, so that may have been a little ambitious. I did, however, find a new right rear caliper that we can use. I couldn't find anything used online because I wasn't willing to wait. As I mentioned, I'm eager to get this thing back on the ground. So I had to go to a dealership in Daytona Beach, Florida to find a new caliper that I can use. And this thing looks really, really good. This is what a brand new 1990s piece looks like. The unfortunate thing of the whole thing is I'm going to tear it apart right away. I'm going to continue to use the front caliper half that Kyle has painted for us, and I'm going to use only the back half of this new caliper, the piece that was cracked before. I just want to remain everything looking the same on the outside, because the black on the finish now is a little bit different than the black that we chose, and the sticker's a little bit different as well. So we are going to use only the back half of this piece, which does feel a little bit odd because these pieces do bring so much money when they're complete, but we got to do what we got to do to get this thing back on the ground. Let's go.
I couldn't bring myself to get the new back half painted. I am an OEM nerd, but it's the little stuff like this that helps make this car my own. After smashing the new right rear caliper on, checking and rechecking, the brakes were finally good to go, and it was time for me to get the wheels back on the car for the first time in what felt like forever. I'm very, very happy with how these turned out. The best part about the car being done is I finally get to stick the key in the ignition and hear this thing start for the first time in 3 months. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.